What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And there were just way too many requests to not look into this at least a little bit. We are talking Becky Hill. Multiple felony charges levied against her. But for what? It may surprise you when you get into the specifics of exactly what she's accused of. And we're going to get to hear from Dick Harpoolian in an interview, plus watch Becky Hill's first appearance. So we're going to get into a lot of details. We're going to talk about what it means for Becky Hill and what it means for Alec Murdaugh and his appeal, which I think is the big question most of you have. Let's get into it. So hit that like button if you guys haven't already. And I want to mention just what an awesome world YouTube is. It's so fun to be able to come on here, talk about this stuff, break it down together, see how it works, see throughout the entire process, not just the appellate process, but the appeal. Also, when you think somebody does something wrong, some justice, an investigation, some charges, but then even if you thought they did something wrong, still putting in your mind that they are presumed innocent and really putting yourself to the test on, do you believe the laws we talk about and the laws we fight so hard to protect and the rights we fight so hard to protect? And also it's a great place because there are people like Anjanette Levy who put together videos like the one we're going to watch, where we get some snippets of the actual facts and scenarios and charges under which Becky Hill has been charged, and an interview with Dick Harpoolian. So I get to sit here, watch with you guys, break down, give you my reaction, pick apart the parts I agree with and don't agree with what's being said, what's being alleged, and even what Dick Harpoolian is going to think is going to happen throughout the process, what we can understand by lawyer speak, right? When you represent somebody and something good happens for your client who is in a very bad spot with multiple convictions, going to be in prison for the rest of his life and beyond, if you look at the sentences for Alec Murdaugh at this point. But even Dick Harpoolian's comments on this entire situation may surprise you a little bit, because I think walking into this, I'll just tell you what was kind of on my mind based on what everybody was saying and asking. Becky Hill arrested for tampering with this jury, telling this jury to convict Alec Murdaugh. Now she's being investigated. Now that it's a crime and we think that they're going to be able to prove this against Becky Hill, Alec Murdaugh automatically gets a new trial. That's what everybody's thinking going into it. But let's see what details, what we can learn from the details we're going to pick up in this video. And this video also gives a background about the whole Becky Hill thing. This is Justice Toll, who she gave the testimony in front of, that she is now being charged with perjury because of. So it's good background. This video is really well put together. So shout to Anjanette Levy. Go give this video a like on her page as well.
They believe Becky Hill tampered with the jury, and they point to her book as Exhibit A. Here's Justice Jean Toll questioning Becky Hill at a hearing in January of 2024.
Well, in your book, you suggest that the guilty verdict was what you wanted, and you were fearful that that a guilty verdict would not be rendered. You say that a lot about your feeling about wanting a guilty verdict, do you not?
I do agree that that is said in the book. And part of that is because I think it was a guilty verdict.
Well, this is that you were describing a time way before the verdict was rendered when you wrote about those things in the book. Isn't that correct?
It is, yes.
And you even have something where you say your eyes met with jurors and others at Moselle, and y'all had an understanding, unspoken, that he was guilty. You said that in the book, did you not?
I did say that in the book, and I would consider that part of the literary, the word that we just said. But there was nothing spoken with the juror at all at Moselle or anywhere else, at the courthouse or anywhere. I think that's part of that poetic license that we write to make something more apparent. But at no time did I read or try to read someone else's eyes. And that was just one of those gut feelings that I wrote in the book.
In the end,
obviously problematic, as you could tell in the hearing. And as we talked about it, problematic, can't be doing stuff like that as the clerk of court. Is that what she has been charged with? That's the question, right? That's the big question that we're trying to get to the bottom of. I haven't even read the documents myself yet. We're going to learn from what we get here. And then at a later date, I will dig into the documents as well. You guys let me know what questions you have, but I've got a pretty good idea about what we're going to go through in this video.
Justice Toll determined that anything Becky Hill said didn't influence the jury with the comments she made to them. But Murdaugh's attorneys disagree, and they're appealing to South Carolina's Supreme Court. So why is Becky Hill facing criminal charges? Well, investigators with SLED say she committed perjury in another exchange with Justice Toll about sealed exhibits for Murdaugh's trial.
Did you ever allow anyone?
So did you catch that? SLED believes, and SLED, yes, same SLED that's in the Alec Murdaugh case, is doing this investigation. They believe at another part of this hearing. So not that part we just heard, not the part about influencing the jury, not the part about where Justice Cole didn't find her credible, but didn't necessarily feel like she was lying and didn't feel like she influenced the jury. And another part is what SLED investigated, and these are what the charges are coming from. Did she give documents to a third party that she shouldn't have, and did she lie about it under oath?
The press to view these sealed exhibits?
No, ma'am.
Did you allow Netflix to ever examine the exhibits for trial?
No, ma'am.
This is a law and crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being received copies of them?
How
To learn more. Investigators with SLED say that statement by Hill was a lie. Justice Toll pressed Becky Hill about the sealed exhibits because some members of the media received copies of them.
How did you handle exhibits? Because you did have the press have great access to the exhibits, and you say several times in your book that you had to stay after to be sure that you interacted with the press about these exhibits. That's true, is it not?
That is true. We had Mr. J. Bender, then we had the pool photographers and someone from maybe the state, I believe, or the Posting Courier, along with the court reporters, someone from court administration, and then someone from the clerk's office every night that would go over the exhibits to make sure everything was correct and within our domain.
Were any press people ever allowed to view the exhibits, even the sealed exhibits that you had on file?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
What was the methodology for allowing them to examine the exhibits? How'd you handle that?
I wasn't there a whole lot when we did this every night, but it's my understanding that the people that were involved with the exhibits, and especially the court reporters, and there was a certain time frame that they were allowed to take their pictures, and everything was, all of the pictures were looked at by the court reporters that were there and the lady from court administration, along with someone from my office and Mr. J. Bender, to make sure that everything was done correctly.
What I'm asking is how you handle having them, the press, view these exhibits.
If I remember correctly, the press, we had certain designated photographers and then someone, I think, from the state or the Posting Courier, and they were responsible for putting it out on a stream for the rest of the media to access.
Would they do that by photographing the exhibits as they were in your possession after court was over that day?
That is correct.
All right. And how did you handle the sealed exhibits in terms of their availability when these press people are there photographing exhibits?
They stayed sealed.
And so you think that you're aware of the fact that some of these on the scene photographs of the two decedents found their way into the public press. You're aware of that, are you not?
Yes, sir, I am. Yes.
After that testimony, Murdaugh's lawyer, Dick Harpoolian, pulled up.
So really good exchange from the judge, right? Didn't end up being the ending and the result that Murdaugh wanted, but that exchange is what led to these charges. And that's what's important. And that's why I think it's great that she put this in this video so you could actually remember how that exchange went, because we all watched it together. And now we get to hear about the charges. It's all about those sealed exhibits and how did they get to the press? And we set it up with some pictures about your book or some questions about your book and how important that was and how you made eyes with the jury and you took your literary, whatever she said. It's like, yeah, but you were doing things that were clearly improper, and even SLED found that they were potentially criminal acts.
Up an email showing that Becky Hill knew that the media had received sealed exhibits.
But what it is an email from Rebecca Hill to Miho Takachuchi, something. Miho, first name. The Buford McDowell body cam should not have gone to you. Please get rid of it. Do not use it. The Judge Newman, specifically ordered the body cam not to use if it got out. Apparently, they're still in the videos we were saved. I appreciate your attention. What about what about the other body cam video we could see on many news documentaries? Can you provide it? It seems the camera was on the other police personnel. I mean, here she's having emails between this Japanese production company about body cams telling them to get rid of it. I think that's important, and I can have a copy of this printed out for you when we get it to a printer for the record.
That would be fine, but do you want to offer it as an exhibit?
I do.
All right, Mr. Waters?
I have no objection. If I can just ask the date of that.
Waters is like, she committed perjury. That's not on me, but it didn't affect our verdict. That's what Waters is going to keep. That's his main goal here, is to secure this verdict, not to protect Becky Hill. If Becky Hill committed a crime and tried to do stuff for fame, money, whatever, that's on her.
The date is July 17th, 2023. July.
All right, that's one thing. What else? I will admit it. I will allow it. That is a impeachment of her testimony to me that she did not send any emails or release anything.
Yes, Your Honor.
In fact, she changed that testimony on redirect when she said she did, so-called by accident, releasing things.
That doesn't appear to be by accident. So we'd like.
The judge said that's impeachment. And that probably tied Sled's hands. It's like if a sitting judge who even agreed with the bulk of what, the state and Becky Hill was saying and did not rule in favor of Murdaugh, still believes Becky Hill basically lied on the stand, found her not credible, found her to be impeached by that email. She said it was by accident. She even changed her own testimony. And Harpoolian's like, that doesn't seem to be by accident, which are the steps you need to prove perjury. When we talk about perjury, it's so much more difficult than impeachment or credibility or reliability or confusion or misunderstanding. We've heard a lot of witnesses explain change in testimony as a misunderstanding. That makes it very difficult as a prosecutor to prove perjury. But when you have a very clear statement under oath to a judge, then you change your own statement, and then there is a document with your words that impeaches and is different than both of the other two statements you made. It shows you did it, and you did it on purpose after you said you didn't do it, but if you did it on accident. This is how you line up perjury. And this is why the other comments with maybe jury tampering or what'd you say or what'd you do to the jury or what was in your book, harder to prove, not included in these charges.
That made part of the record. Secondly, I have sitting outside the courtroom, the clerk of court for Barnwell County, Rhonda McElvey. She specifically denied saying certain things to the clerk of court of Barnwell County and denied doing certain things. I think you're going to find her testimony extraordinarily instructive and educational. And it shouldn't take, I would be shocked if it took 20 minutes.
Well, in light of the answers she gave to my questions and some of yours in that regard, I'm going to allow it.
After Hill's testimony,
Which
Murdaugh
shows you what Judge Toll felt about Becky Hill's testimony and whether or not she was honest and credible.
sat grasping his hands. Then the clerk of court from Barnwell County testified.
During that, before the trial, before we ever picked a jury, did she ever discuss with you that she was going to write a book?
Yes, sir. She
And
wanted to write a book. Yes,
Wanted to write a book. Did she indicate what the book was going to be about?
about the trial.
About the Murdaugh trial?
Yes, sir.
And did she discuss with you, what, if anything, did she discuss with you about how she felt the verdict should turn out to be in the Murdaugh trial, vis-a-vis in reference to the book? What would help the book?
A guilty verdict.
And tell the judge and me what exactly she said to you that you remember. This is prior to the trial.
Okay. Well, first of all, she said we might want to write a book because she needed a lake house and I needed to retire. And then further conversations, a guilty verdict would sell more books. And we left it at that. This was before, even in December.
And when did she ever?
And again, now pay attention. What does this have to do with the criminal charges we're talking about today, right? Is this included? Is this something she's being charged with? Because obviously this would help the Murdaugh appeal.
Ever say that again to you during the weeks you spent there?
Several times. It could be said it was, amongst friends in their office, or we might be having dinner, that kind of stuff, but that's about it.
That she needed a guilty verdict to sell more books.
That would be the best way to sell books, yes, sir.
The best way to sell books. Now, during this process, did she ever express to you an opinion on whether or not, in fact, was Mr. Murdaugh guilty of the murders of his son and his wife?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what she said, and if you remember when.
I don't exactly remember when. I know it's over half of the trial had already happened, but the evidence was coming forth that it looked like he might be guilty. And she made a comment that guilty verdict would be better for sale books.
Rhonda McElveen's testimony then turned to contact that Becky Hill had with the jurors.
Okay. Now, as a result of a conversation you had sometime during the trial, I don't want you to relay to me what was told you. Did you have a discussion with the clerk, Becky Hill, about her being with jurors on her own?
Yes, sir, I did. One morning I showed up to Colony County and I was told that she had taken a juror home the night before. And I was in the courtroom and I saw her, and it was between the pews and where the back row pews are. And I mentioned to Miss Becky, I said, please tell me you didn't take a juror home last night. And she told me, I did, but I didn't talk about the case. I had a bailiff with me. Mr. Bill was with me. I said, Becky, you don't do things like that. I thought we had stopped everything. It wasn't far enough along to really cause a major problem, or I would have told Judge Newman. But I thought we had to understand that you did not spend time alone with the jurors.
Now, at the end of the hearing, Justice Toll found that Becky Hill was not credible. Those were her words. But she denied Alec Murdaugh's request for a new trial, as I mentioned earlier. But SLED's investigation was not over. And this week, Becky Hill was charged with felonies, including perjury and misconduct in office. A warrant states, in Richland County, South Carolina, on or about January 29th, 2024, Mary Rebecca.
So here are the facts. Here's the factual scenario and description of the offense that they have against Becky Hill. Okay? So she's going to read it to us, and we're going to see what parts of that hearing and how it connects to Alec Murdaugh. How much does Becky Hill's arrest and charges connect to Alec Murdaugh's appeal?
H. Hill, being the elected clerk of South Carolina on or about January 29th, 2024, Mary Rebecca H. Hill, being the elected clerk of court of Colleton County, did willfully and unlawfully give false, misleading, or incomplete testimony while under oath in a court of record. During the hearing, former Clerk Hill did willfully and unlawfully give false and misleading testimony when Chief Justice Jean Toll asked former Clerk Hill, "Did you allow anyone from the press to view the sealed exhibits?" And Hill responded, "No, ma'am." This statement was inconsistent with the events of February 28, 2023, when former Clerk Hill did release or make available sealed evidence, photographs to a third party or parties. Hill.
So that is the charge. That is perjury, where she said, "No, ma'am. Did you allow anyone from the press to see sealed exhibits?" "No, ma'am." And then the email documented that she absolutely did make that available. And guess who put all this evidence together? Guess who basically did the real investigation into Becky Hill? It wasn't SLED. It was Dick Harpoolian and Alec Murdaugh's team. They had all this. They set it all up. They pushed forward and got the information from the jurors first. If you remember back then, it wasn't like this obvious thing like we're going to have a juror interview and we're going to interview Becky Hill. That wasn't like an obvious thing. That was a big step by this judge. And in this case, that the defense team had to fight hard for. Without that hearing, Becky Hill probably never has criminal charges filed against her. But because they were able to get her there under oath, she didn't plead the fifth, which a lot of us thought she might. Probably would have been a better idea. She didn't plead the fifth. They were able to set it up, knock it down. And it wasn't Justice Toll trying to set her up. She was just asking questions. Becky Hill decided to allegedly lie. And Dick Harpoolian had the goods, had the email, SLED, saw it, found it was enough. Now we'll see if it's enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. But that is what the perjury is connected to. Not jury tampering, not telling the jury they had to vote guilty, not forcing a jury to vote guilty, at least for this charge.
Did release or make available sealed evidence, photographs to a third party or parties. Hill also faces misconduct in office charges and obstruction charges, one involving an allegation that she failed to protect the sealed exhibits, and another about her book. The warrant states, on or about June 7th, 2023, Mary Rebecca Hill did promote a book in which she was an author, Behind the Doors of Justice, The Murdaugh Murders, while using her public office to promote the aforesaid book on social media. Such act being for her own financial gain and in violation of her duties, in violation of the laws of the state of South Carolina. Affiant's belief is based upon video evidence, statements, and SLED investigation. Hill is also accused of using federal funds meant to support child support enforcement to give herself a bonus.
So, misconduct in office, having to do with promoting her book, using her office to personally, financially benefit. So once again, not forcing a jury to vote guilty, not being the reason Alec Murdaugh lost. And why is it like this? Does SLED not want to affect Alec Murdaugh's case? Is that why they picked and chose certain things to charge her with, certain factual scenarios? But they did want to punish her, or they felt like the public pressure, they had to punish Becky Hill? Why is it specifically this? Was this all they could really legitimately prove criminally? Those are all open and fair questions, but they are definitely questions. Because as I'm looking at the documents Anjanette Levy is putting on the screen, which I think she's putting everything you need to discuss this case. Again, we'll look further into it if you guys have more questions, and if you want to, and if you're interested in this, hit the like button. That'll let me know. We'll keep digging on this and keep following this Becky Hill case. But I just found it very interesting, the verbiage used and the angles taken at the criminal charges filed against Becky Hill. I agree with what they're doing here, if they can prove it, that she absolutely should be punished for this, for these allegations, if they are true and if they can be proven. Lying under oath should always be punished. Using your office to financially benefit a public office like this, absolutely, we just can't have that.
Warrant states, on or about September 1st, 2021 through March 5th, 2024, Mary Rebecca Hill, being the elected clerk of court of Colleton County, Hill requested and then received $9,880.10 in financial bonuses for herself that were paid from the Title 4D incentive funds. Such funds were obtained by Hill and utilized for her own financial gain. Furthermore, on or about March 5th, 2024, Hill received a financial gift and or bonus in the amount of $2,000 paid by a check from the Colleton County Clerk of Court's office funds and utilized for her own financial gain in violation of her duties. So to discuss this major development, I want to bring...
And bangarang, she gets Dick Harpoolian to come and discuss how this affects Alec Murdaugh's appeal. So I think you can already understand. First off, anytime the clerk of court, there's criminal charges filed against things that she did during your trial, that's obviously a good thing. From my perspective, regardless of if it connects specifically to pushing the jury, influencing the jury, forcing the jury to vote guilty on Murdaugh, I don't really care. If I'm in appellate court, it's a new trial. Like, I got to be honest. This is so unusual. This never happens. This is so bad. We cannot allow clerks of court to do this, to make sure somebody is convicted and then just allow that conviction to stand. Like, it almost doesn't matter what the verbiage they put in these charging documents to me. If I'm an appellate court judge, which I will never be, right? So take it with a grain of salt. No way this verdict can stand. I don't care what you think about Alec Murdaugh. I don't care how bad you think he is. I don't care how horrible it was what he was convicted of. Absolutely horrible, heinous, brutal. This just can't be how the American criminal justice system works. We said it back then. We're saying it again now. Now that charges are filed, it's just so bad for them. But it's not legally a slam dunk because of the verbiage. And let's see how confident Dick Harpoolian is.
Bring in Dick Harpoolian. He is one of Alec Murdaugh's attorneys. So, Dick, I want to know, how are you feeling about this development with Becky Hill's arrest? She has now been charged formally with perjury. Basically, they believe she lied to Justice Toll. You believe at the time last year during the hearing that she lied to Justice Toll when you presented that email from the Japanese film crew. So how is this going to impact the appeal?
Well, I think clearly Justice Toll didn't find her credible, but not being credible and lying under oath are two different things. She not only, I mean, she's been charged. A prosecutor believes beyond a reasonable doubt she lied under oath about giving certain sealed materials to a Japanese film crew or other people. She testified during that proceeding that she never said anything to either one of the jurors that testified. They say she attempted to influence them. One of them said it did influence her. She said never happened. So it just seems to me that her any shred of credibility or any shred of giving.
You notice how he's saying, even the justice said she's not credible. Everything she said about the jury, he keeps trying to bring in stuff about the jury. I tend to agree with him, right? I tend to agree with him that what she was doing had to somewhat affect the jury. And the way the case law, the way I read it, which is in agreement with the defense, is that's enough. You don't have to actually prove she changed the juror's mind. Again, not a decision for me to make, but we've kind of already litigated that on this channel. But he's still focusing on the jury tampering and what she did to the jury more than really what's in these perjury charges.
A decision that relies on anything she said ought to go out the window. So Jim Griffin and I talked after we had a chance to examine the warrants yesterday, and we believe that this should help us in our appeal.
Going to file anything?
I would agree. But even you can tell by his demeanor and what he's saying, this doesn't make it a slam dunk. If she was being charged with jury tampering and, you know, those types of charges, and if the perjury was, I didn't influence the jury, but actually they proved somehow that she did with some juror statements, that would obviously be a slam dunk.
With the South Carolina Supreme Court, some type of addendum or something like that, because she now has been formally charged?
Well, so the process is on January 8th, we filed our formal appeal briefs and exhibits. They have till August 8th, the state, till August 8th to respond to that. And then we get 30 days after that to respond to their response. So in that response to their response, we will obviously fold this in.
Were you surprised at how long it took for the charges to be filed? Because we knew for a very long time, from at least before you filed your motion for a new trial back in September of 2023, that she was under suspicion for ethics violations, that there was a lot circulating out there. There were a lot of rumors about what.
Yeah, and that's a reminder that there's still potentially more, right? This wasn't the only thing that there were some accusations and some rumors out there about.
What she was doing with the book. And even at the end of the trial, I remember hearing very clearly that she was talking with the four woman on the jury. There was a lot out there. And then we knew there was a criminal investigation. Are you surprised that it took this long for charges to be filed? We know that these investigations can take a long time, but it's been well over a year since the hearing. That was January of 2024 when you guys had your hearing for the motion for a new trial.
Well, it has taken a very long time. Fortunately, something has happened prior to us having to file that final brief. But as I told a reporter yesterday, I think this is a good start. I'm hoping this isn't the end all be all. Remember now, and this concerns us, the agency investigating her is the same agency that did the investigation on the murder case and the witnesses on the murder case. It raises severe and significant questions about whether there's a conflict. Now they'll say, well, it's a different division and whatever. Well, we're a small.
I tend to agree with him here as well. I tend to agree with him. And this is the thing. People hate criminal defense lawyers, right? They hate their clients. And they equate them together. And I get it. I understand. But it's like, this is what criminal defense lawyers should do. They point out issues. They shine the light. They highlight problems. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're blowing smoke. Sometimes they throw too much up against the wall and jurors can see through that and, still convict people that deserve to be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you didn't have criminal defense lawyers doing stuff like this, then you have, I'm not going to say there's any bad cops. I'm not going to say there's any, certain police departments or groups of cops and police departments can sometimes be bad. But if you don't shine a light here, the bad cops sometimes can have fruit of the poisonous tree spreading throughout multiple investigations. And that's what you don't want to happen. So I'm not saying SLED is full of bad cops, but if it were, the same bad cops might be doing multiple investigations that all affect things that affect SLED. And that's what you have to be careful to protect against. And guess what? Shining a light just gives you the answer. If they did everything appropriately, they did everything the way they should have, great. But if there's an appearance of impropriety, a potential conflict like we've seen in other cases, they really shouldn't be doing the investigation. Did that happen here? I don't know, but the question should be asked. If he didn't ask the question, he wouldn't be doing his job.
State, that's a small agency. It's the same chief supervising both investigations. And I'm sure I'm not questioning anybody's integrity. What I am questioning is the ability to focus on Becky Hill and look in areas that might further jeopardize that conviction. There's a whole series of events I was a part of before the judge ultimately dismissed the juror we all know as Egg Lady. There were a series of hearing conferences in chambers concerning allegations Becky Hill was making before her more than a week or 10 days prior to her actually being excused, involving some email that didn't exist. We find out didn't exist by what she said was Egg Lady's former husband, which it wasn't. It was a guy in Georgia. It had nothing to do with the case. Why was she stirring the pot on that? Obviously intentionally. A week or more before Egg Lady when she came in with more evidence. She was out to get the Egg Lady excuse from the jury. Did that mean she had inside information on her Egg Lady's position? Apparently she did indicate in her testimony and affidavits that she had severe questions about whether the state had proved beyond a reasonable doubt. How did she know that? Why was she after that? Those are the questions that need to be asked and investigated. There are folks who were witnesses to that process that I don't know have been interviewed. I know they, like last week or week before last, couple of SWAT agents interviewed the two jurors that testified. And Joe McCullough, their lawyer, I think he issued a statement yesterday, indicated it was perfunctory at best. And it wasn't a real effort to get to the bottom of the matter. So I'm concerned about that. All we really want is for Alec Murdaugh to get a fair trial. Now, and people say, well, he's going to get.
Listen, say whatever you want about the investigation. There are charges here. That's great. But a lot of what we heard, like I said, was done by the investigation of the criminal defense lawyers for Alec Murdaugh and presented to the court by the criminal defense lawyers for Alec Murdaugh. So what did SLED do? What did they really put together? How deep did their investigation go? I think those are fair questions.
He's pled guilty to stealing millions of dollars from his clients. If he got a new trial and was acquitted, he would not get out until he's 75 or older, and he's 52 now. So this isn't a walk. This isn't a free walk for Alec Murdaugh. It's a trial based on the facts, not on a jury that somebody's tried to fix.
He's like, so just so the public is understanding, we're not putting a very dangerous man back on the streets. He still has 25 years to do in prison.
I feel like there are several things that could happen here with the South Carolina Supreme Court. Is it possible that they feel could they find that Justice Toll erred in not hearing testimony from the Egg Lady and then kick it back to the lower court for further proceedings?
No.
Is that one possibility?
No. Look, the record Justice Tolmay is pretty damn good, except we think there's federal cases that say you don't ask the juror, would it have changed the verdict or did they change the verdict? The question is, did somebody in authority say things to them that could have objectively influenced their verdict? Not whether it did or didn't. She applied a state case called Green, which we would respectfully disagree with her on what it means, but it doesn't mean that. There's a federal case which says that if the record, under the record she made, which was the court talked to them, the court said things that could have influenced, we get a new trial. So, and if the state Supreme Court does not adopt that federal standard, we'll ask a federal court to hear this. But look, this is
it's not over, is what he's saying. Even if they lose, it's not over. That's what that means for lawyer speak. And that's what we tell clients all the time after, it's not over. We still have the appeal. So you lose that appeal. It's not over. We still have this appeal, that appeal. So he's just explaining that the federal law is more on his side than the state law. So don't be surprised, almost is what it sounds like. If we don't win in state court, we still have the federal appeal. That's what it sounds like lawyer speak to me is, even with this, he's not overly confident they're going to win at the state level. I think they should. I really think they should. People might not be happy about that. And I totally understand how you feel about Alec Murdaugh, how you feel about the presentation of the evidence in that case. I think there were issues in the trial itself that he's going to mention here at the end. But regardless of all of that, you just wouldn't want your loved one or yourself having a clerk of court doing the shenanigans that Becky Hill has been accused of doing. And even someone admitted, right? Even some of the non-criminal action. That can't be how it is. And I'll stand firmly on that. I believe that to be right and the truth.
I'm convinced that we have a good opportunity here for our Supreme Court to set the boundaries on what is misconduct and what level of conduct by that clerk of court or bailiff or some court official requires a new trial. And they could give us a new trial without ever having to deal with the myriad of evidentiary issues that were raised during the trial. And there's all kinds of issues about what we would call, technically 404 evidence, 403 evidence.
A lot of the financial crimes and stuff like that, the other bad acts, that's what he's mentioning here. We talked about that a lot. Not really the focus of today's video. This is more about Becky Hill.
Expert evidence, whether they're qualified to testify or not. Our brief is well over 100 pages, and it just scratches the surface. So I'm not confident is the wrong word, but I'm optimistic that our Supreme Court will allow us to come back and give out a opportunity to defend himself on the murder charges.
So if you're filing your response in September, your response to the state's response, when do you expect the South Carolina Supreme Court to issue a decision?
Well, they could have oral argument. I suspect they will in this case. They don't have to. I think the briefing and the record on the clerk's misconduct is enough that they could issue an order without oral argument. But they're called the Supreme Court for a reason. There's no higher court in this state, and they'll hear it when they want to hear it, and they'll issue a decision when they want to issue a decision. So I've seen cases take 5 years to get a decision. I've seen cases in which 5 days a decision was issued. So that's all internal. It's like U.S. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, "The law is what we say it is." It's not arrogant. They're the final court. In this case, the state's final court. So they'll do it when they're ready to do it.
They interpret the law. They don't write it, but they interpret it. They don't write what it says. They tell you what it says, like he said.
You're optimistic that you will get some relief at the state Supreme Court level. Have you spoken to Alec Murdaugh about this latest development with Becky Hill being charged?
No, we talk every Friday, so I'll talk to him tomorrow. Jim and I will talk to him. Jim or I or both of us will talk to him tomorrow, and we'll let him. He gets it, but he does have access to internet.
Every Friday they talk to him. That's wild to just think. Still, even now, every Friday.
I'm sure you've seen the story, but access to a phone is another matter altogether. So it's somewhat limited.
Well, it's certainly.
So he has access to the internet, so he's probably already seen it. Imagine what Alec comment how you think Alec Murdaugh feels about this.
An interesting turn of events. I'm not really sure it's that surprising. I think what's surprising is that it took this long because we've heard nothing about how this investigation was progressing. And I think a lot of people were wondering if anything was going to happen. So were you surprised when the charges were actually filed?
I knew because they'd interviewed those two jurors a couple of weeks ago, something was going on. I didn't know when or what. And of course, I'm a little disappointed they haven't borne down on the obstruction of justice charge. It might be there. I'm not saying she did, as to attempted obstruction in reference to the jurors. I'm hoping that investigation, and they may conclude there's no charges to be brought, but I think it does merit extraordinarily close scrutiny by an objective investigator.
Have you received any response?
And so that was one of the key moments. He still hopes they move forward on the obstruction of justice charge, which would be jury tampering, pushing them, influencing them. That's what he really wants, because that would be the golden ticket to Alec Murdaugh's appeal, that obstruction of justice.
From the public after Hill's arrest?
Well, I think we've gotten hundreds of emails in the last 12 hours from people around the country expressing what you just said, which is why it takes so long, but this is a good thing. Alex should get a fair trial. I'm really sort of buoyed by the sort of overwhelming amount of opinion and emails and texts and posts that we're getting, that people believe in the rule of law. I mean, that is, these times especially, it's important to understand, no matter how bad and how egregious the accusations are, everybody should get a fair trial.
Everyone deserves a fair trial.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So interesting. I mean, just so interesting, and so much from that one video. Let's go now to the Zoom court appearance by Becky Hill. Let's see how she does here. On the other side, some may say.
Welcome, everyone. We have Agent Josefsky, Agent Fitzgerald, Attorney Mr. Lewis, and the press. So welcome, everyone. Mrs. Hill, will you please state your full name for the record? Mary Rebecca Hill. Thank you. Do we have the date on the, okay, I see him back there. I just want to make sure that the agents were there. All right. I'm going to go through the rights and responsibilities. I'll advise you some information, and then at the end, we'll hear from the state and we'll hear from your attorney. Okay. All right. Before I set your bond, I need to advise you some information and make you aware of your rights. You've been charged with 2 counts of misconduct in office and obstructing justice. These penalties for these three, they're common law penalties, so it's at the judge's discretion. However, I can tell you that typically the common law crimes carry possible penalties of 0 to 10 years. Your court date is scheduled for July 18th, 2025 at 9 o'clock at the courthouse at 101 Hampton Street. And do you understand the charges and penalty? Yes, Your Honor. Okay. And I assume you're familiar with that location. So because this is a general sessions offense, you have a right to a preliminary hearing. This is a hearing.
I assume you're familiar with that location. You think she says that to everybody, or just clerks of court?
That will determine if the prosecution has enough evidence to move forward with the trial. If you wish to have a preliminary hearing, you must request it within 10 days. And I'm going to send that paperwork with your packet for the preliminary hearing. If you'd like to have that, you can go ahead and sign that now, and then we'll get that scheduled. Before you can plead guilty or not guilty or proceed to trial, you need to know you have a right to an attorney. And I see that you have a private attorney here. And am I correct? It's Will Lewis? Yes, Your Honor. Okay, thank you. You need to know if you've ordered an attorney at any point, you can apply for a public defender. I'm assuming you want to stick with Mr. Lewis at this point. Okay, what I will do, I will send the application in your packet for public defender in case things don't work out and you change your mind. So you will have that application. Okay. All right. Would you please give me a good telephone number? And you know what? I think with the press, we're live streaming. I'm going to get that after, so we don't have that on the live stream. Okay. And I'll check with your address for that as well. You do need to know you keep your address and phone number updated with the court. You're required to notify the court if you've had any change of address into the completion of the case. Not receiving the notification due to the wrong address will not be an excuse for not attending court, and a bench warrant could be issued for your arrest and your bond revoked. You have a right to request a jury trial, and a jury trial would be judged by a jury of your peers as opposed to a bench trial with a judge. You have a right to be present at your trial, and you need to be aware the trial will proceed in your absence should you fail to attend. In a general sessions court, if you do not appear, you can be fined an additional $5,000 and 5 years in jail. If your charges are dismissed, or if you're found not guilty, if they're not crossed, you may request to have your record expunged, which means it'll be taken off your record like nothing has ever happened. Do you fully understand your rights and responsibilities I've gone over this morning? Yes. Okay.
I'm kind of interested, just as I'm listening to all this again so many times, sometimes it can just, go right in one ear and out the other. But I wonder if they'd make some kind of deal with her, based on our relationships. How bad is the prosecutors, law enforcement? How bad are they going to think this is and look at this? Or are they going to give her some slap on the wrist and just keep it moving? Because imagine if she, pled to something that could eventually be expunged, and then it all is like it went away and didn't even exist.
Okay. At this time,
This is Alex Bozeski was fled. Your Honor, we have no recommendation as far as bond.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then count.
This isn't any kind of like violent offense. It's no surprise that she was let out on bond. It's just interesting to see she turned herself in, had this hearing. She is on the other side of the process now than she spent most of her life and her entire career.
Sir, would you like to address
Yes,
the
Your Honor.
this time?
Lewis, may it please the court. And I apologize for sitting down, not saying it, but speaking to the court is the only way I can get in your
The cameras are a little messed up, I know. Thank you.
the position that they've taken in under 17 or 1510, we're entitled to recognizance bond on her own cognizance, absent showing that she's a danger to the community or risk of flight. She lives here. She turned herself in. We found out about these charges last night. We're here right now. So we asked that she's released on her own cognizance.
He's 100% correct. That's the bond for Becky Hill. Go ahead, release on your own recognizance. You'll show up. You have ties to the community. You turned yourself in today. You're not a flight risk. You're not a danger to the community. Some may disagree with that. Alec Murdaugh may disagree with that, but legally speaking, there's no reason that she needs to be held. She is not the type of person that the rules are written to be held with some high bond or any bond at all, or no bond, of course. She's just not in that category or any of those categories.
All right. All right. Ms. Hill, are you currently on probation, parole, or out on bond now? Okay. And then how long have you lived at your address?
25 years.
Okay. All right. I do not find you to be a flight risk or danger to the community at this time. Before I set your bond, I must apply stipulations of the bond. And if you break any of these, it can result in revoking your bond and you'd be subject to remain in jail until your case has been called to trial. Do you understand? Okay. You must appear at all your court dates. You need to keep the peace. In other words, stay out of trouble. Because I do not find you a flight risk or danger to the community, you are entitled to a PR bond. I'm going to give you a PR bond of $10,000 per charge for a total of $30,000, and that'll do it. Thank you all for being present and so attentive. But Ms. Hill, before I sign off, do you have any questions or anything you want to ask?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir. I see you, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry to bring up this right now. There's one issue that we were hoping to resolve. There is a Richland County warrant for perjury related to the obstruction warrant at 166. We would ask, and I have the agents, and I've confirmed this with Solicitor Hubbard, who has the case, as well as SLED. I've also reached out to Judge Scott's office in Richland County, and they're okay with this. We would ask under 22-5-190, which establishes your powers, Your Honor, that you endorse that warrant for it to be served here. And what that will allow you to do, Your Honor, under State v. Ravens, is set her bond on that year. And that would just avoid us from having to go all the way to Richland County and all the processing and perhaps not be there till 9 p.m. just for some paperwork. Not confirmed with all parties that they have no issue. I do think from a practical perspective, and this is why we wanted to talk to you, once you endorse the warrant and they serve it on her, there might be like 5 minutes of paperwork to do, kind of like what we did this morning, and then we reissue the bond. So I was hoping Your Honor would be open to that. It's also permissible.
Seems like a very reasonable ask. I would tend to agree with him. I would say yes to this if I was the judge, but will this judge?
Under bench book at page 35, the 2011 bench book, and I've got an attorney general opinion as well that I'm happy to provide the court for this authority.
Okay. I got word that you were possibly going to ask that, and I'm not inclined to do that. I've talked to our Chief Justice here. We want to keep this simple. We want to keep it within our jurisdiction, and so I'm not going to do that today. We're sorry for the inconvenience, but we're not here for convenience. Okay.
I hear you.
All right. Thank you all for coming, and good luck to you all.
Sorry for the inconvenience, but we are not here for convenience. Was that a shot? I don't know, but it seemed like a reasonable enough ask for me, but I don't know these people. They're not working in my judicial system. They're not here locally for me. And I don't know, are there going to be people that are very unhappy with how Becky has conducted herself? I would be. So let me know what you guys think about this wild ride in this case that just never seems to disappoint when it comes to shocking information or things that are so unlikely to happen with people working in the justice system, be it lawyers, judges, clerks. I don't know, man. I don't know about this world we live in, right? Hit that like button. That's the end of it. Till next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know.